Hello and thank you for watching. This is Ariel Adamson of Rogue Tech. I'm going to be bringing to you today a Bantchantments deck tech. This deck has served me very well over the last week just out in testing. Finished 401 F&M and earned the top 8 competitor mat from States today. Wasn't able to take it all the way to the top due to some unfortunate pulls, but still very happy with this deck and I want to share it with all of you. To start off, this is an enchantment deck, so I am running 3 Sphere of Safety. These cards I haven't seen a whole lot of play. They do a really good job about stopping attacks altogether, which is helpful against control because they don't want to be spending their mana, and against aggro because they don't have the mana to spend. But they require a lot of support to really make use of, so no surprise that not very many decks can really run a Sphere of Safety effectively. Now, to talk about the enchantments that are supporting the Sphere of Safety, first off we've got 2 Blind Obedience that I have fallen in love with from my Esper control days. The Extorts add up over time, great against control, and then obviously the coming into play tapped is amazing against aggro decks, and mid-range decks it's helpful for both reasons. I never really want to see more than one, but I always want to see one per game. So 2 seems to be the right number to have. 3 Detention Spheres. These are kind of the choice removal right now as we don't have a whole lot to work with being so soon after rotation. They hit just about everything and they accept other Detention Spheres. Next, we've got 3 Mana Blooms. This is a card that hasn't received a whole lot of love. I am absolutely loving it. There's a few synergies in this deck beyond Sphere of Safety, for example, Blind Obedience. Blind Obedience coming into play, and then Mana Blooming just even for 0 with an Extort, and having it come back every turn. It's just free Extort triggers over and over again until they can either answer it or get a larger life total. The other purpose of Mana Bloom is to basically act as a Farseek. It allows for some pretty explosive turn 3s. And to help aid with that, I'm running 4 Sylvan Caryatids, including 1 Korean that I pulled today out of my prize packs. And those 7 working together work just like a Farseek, allowing for some crazy acceleration. And it might not be as good as Farseek, but in some cases it's even better between the synergies and the ability to block. Now, as far as what those explosive turn 3s are, I've got 4 Voice of Resurgence, which dropping multiples of those is always detrimental to the opponent unless they are following up the D-Sphere. And then 3 Fleecemane Lion, creating a total of 7 drops, 7 2-drops that are just absolutely must-answer cards. This deck has often been described as a very high-pressure deck. It feels, my opponents have described it as they have to answer everything I drop. There's no cards that they just kind of sigh and think, oh, you just played that. Everything has a purpose, and these guys definitely help in that. Next we got 2 Trostanis. We're getting into the bombs of the deck now. The Trostanis play very nice with the high toughness, low mana of Fleecemane, as well as the double bodies of Voice of Resurgence, and the fact that the tokens can just get bigger and bigger by a factorial. Today I actually ended up winning a match just because he couldn't stop the Trostani, and I just kept populating another token, and even though he had much bigger creatures than I did, the tokens were just too much to deal with. The next bomb, which serves both as a bomb and as yet another enchantment that produces even more enchantments, is Heliod. The Vigilance isn't a huge benefit, it does come in handy, but the biggest thing that's helpful about him is the fact that he can make more dudes. They're tokens, they're enchantments, they fit well with everything else going on here, and occasionally as a 5/6 indestructible he's just a very good beat stick. And a recent crowd favorite, Elspeth, is obviously doing very good right now. +1, dropping 3 tokens into play, creating all the blockers I need. A little weak to flyers, but definitely puts a lot of pressure down. Fortunately, a majority of the flyers that people run die to the -3 ability, along with most of the mid-rangey stuff that generally gives me a little bit of trouble, such as Polakrunos. And then the ultimate is almost always a game bender. Then I have a single Ajani's Chosen. I'd love to find room for more in here, but I really don't think it's necessary. The Mana Bloom synergy, again, really good here, creating lots of tokens with Trostani and extorting whatever else is going on, and just outnumbering my opponent, which also makes the voice tokens bigger. So it's just all around good synergy deck. Then we have our support cards. Originally I was running 2 Supreme Verdicts. Supreme Verdict was a little too detrimental on my side, and I found that with the mana ramp that I have available, Cyclonic Rift is really good, so I'm running 2 of those in the main. The pay 2 is occasionally relevant, stops an Aetherling for a turn, just keeps Planeswalkers off their ultimates, but the Overload is really where it's at because it allows for a really good Alpha Strike finish. Then, of course, I'm playing blue and white at the same time, so everyone says I need to run 4 Sphinx's Revelation, and with this amount of ramp, I can agree with that. If I didn't have access to so much ramp, I would probably cap out at 3, just because a Sphinx's Rev does not win a game unless you can really pour a lot into it. Now, the mana is pretty simple. Running 4 Breeding Pool, 4 Temple Garden, 4 Hallowed Fountain, 4 Temple of Mystery. I've been enjoying the Skylands. I would like to have a couple of more Skylands. I think 6 is probably the max for this build, but we'll see if Born of the Gods brings anything else that changes the dynamic of this deck entirely. I'm running 4 Forests because I need to be hitting my green sources early, and I'm running 4 Plains because I need to be hitting double white fairly often. If something happens, anything from me not drawing a mana source, or a mana dork, or any of my mana fixers, to them getting inhibited in some way, I need to be able to cast my mana-intensive white spells with relative ease. And then I'm also running a single island, because I do have blue in the deck, and people do play Burning Earth, so the island comes in handy at times. That is the main deck. I'm very happy with the build as is. The only thing I often consider is changing the Fleecemane and voice count, switching one out. The rest of the deck as a main board seems to be performing very well. Sphere of Safety is definitely the weakest card in here, but I enjoy having it main deck because it's very relevant until my opponent has answers and until I know what I need to be doing to beat them. This deck attacks from so many different approaches that they never really know what to do about it, and Sphere of Safety helps give me enough time for them to kind of flounder and me to build up a force that can overwhelm them. Now my sideboard is pretty simple. I got 3 Pithing Needle because Aetherling is an absolute problem for this deck. It's unblockable damage, oftentimes backed up with an Azorius Charm for lifelink, so I can't quite extort them to death. It's just a huge problem. Ashiok is also a huge problem because I'm running such high impact cards for low mana cost that they can get a lot of value out of it really fast. Running 2 Lavinia the 10th because Planeswalkers in the new red is pretty annoying. Xenaghost, Chandra, Domri, everything along those lines. Not to mention just the big red and mid red decks that are running around, Mogus of the Fanatic, all that stuff. It's just good to have something that can brick them. 4/4 bodies get big enough to kill just about everything they run, and the pro red allows me to get through at their walkers, which is a huge advantage. And detaining 4 and less is their entire board, which that extra turn is oftentimes all I need to deal my damage. 3 Advent of the Wurm. These come in almost all the time. I don't like them main board because that kind of changes the deck to a very aggressive build, and I'm trying to filter out what my opponent's doing and have more options in my main board. Whereas game 2, I can bring these in a lot and know when they're best to use. For example, against more mid-rangey aggro decks that aren't going to be countering or wrathing, then I can just drop these really fast, get some early advantage, and they can't really deal with that much pressure when I'm going 3-drop for 2 and 5-drop for 4. Oftentimes the 5-drop coming down on turn 3, or 5 mana coming down on turn, or 5 power coming down on turn 3. It's just too much pressure for a lot of those mid-rangey decks to deal with. However, when I'm going against control, I end up having to hold on to those for a post Wrath of some sort, and have something to follow up so I can get the damage in when they're not really expecting it. And playing it main board would mean that they're expecting it, so I don't want to give them that little bit of an insight. Here's the 4th Fleecemane. Comes in a lot, usually trades place with a voice against non-control matchups because the 3/3 body that early in the game is really good against most of the aggressive decks as they're running a lot of 2 power and toughness dudes. Also really good against control, it's just I have to know when I need to play them when I'm playing against control. So I use game 1 to kind of filter out what the best plays are, because if I'm drawing Fleecemane against control, I want to hold on to it until I can make it monstrous, whereas against mid-range, I really need to be dropping them out as fast as I can. The extra Cyclonic Rift is absolutely huge against any aggressive deck. Helps me buy extra time in the early game, and then wrathing their whole board for that Alpha Strike is just huge. Primeval Bounty hasn't seen a whole lot of play. I'm often asked why I don't run it main. Main reason is because it's a very slow card. Because this deck can shift gears so easily, if I'm going super aggressive in game 1, then I don't want to have a Primeval Bounty because all of a sudden I'm dropping it and I have no follow-up because I've already played all my spells by the time I have 6 mana. However, against a more control-y deck or a longer running deck, Primeval Bounty is absolutely amazing. It did end a game today because I had 2 monstrous Fleecemanes that I just kept putting counters on using the Mana Bloom. There's that synergy again. Just Mana Bloom for 1 green and put 3 counters on a hexproof Fleecemane. It was pretty difficult for him to deal with, and he did succumb pretty quick to that. 2 Sylvan Primordials. These were originally originally added to the board for control, but I'm finding that they're better against more mid-rangey decks than anything. Dealing with planeswalkers is huge. Decks that run Vraska or Ralzeric, or they're depending on things that are going to be sitting there for a little while that might be a little bit difficult for me to get at. Sylvan Primordial is absolutely amazing. Also, the ramp that I have is great because I can run out a Sylvan Primordial and then take out one of their lands and get even further ahead of them. The other thing that's great about Sylvan Primordial is it is one of the few creatures in my entire deck, main board and side, that interact favorably with Blood Baron. Advent of the Wurm is actually the only other creature that interacts favorably with Blood Baron. Aside from those 2, I basically just have to outpressure decks that run Blood Baron. Rest in peace. This is the weakest card in the board. I know that when I do use it, it's going to be extremely relevant. However, I have yet to cite it in. It just hasn't been. I haven't played against any whip decks or anything really trying to abuse those synergies that are available, and I'm not sure why people aren't playing them. But I think these will probably get cut if the meta continues to look the same. My first inkling would be 4th Cyclonic Rift available and a 4th Advent in the board. Switching these out. Other than that, maybe a 2nd Primeval Bounty or another Ajani's Chosen, or perhaps Detention Sphere. So those are some options I'm looking at for this. This is honestly the only slots in the deck that I don't think is just about perfect, and it's always great when you go into a major competition like States and you come out of it thinking that your deck was as good as it could have been. If you are interested in a little bit of the meta that was at States, we saw a lot of Esper control, a few Azorius control decks, so just a lot of control in general. The winner was a Borzov control, otherwise known as Dega control. It was a little mid-rangey, Blood Barons, lots of kill spells, Wrath, Anger of the Gods, Thoughtseize, things along that line. I'll take a closer look at the list when they get posted up on TCG here in a while. But I think the deck was really good. I personally had a really good matchup against it. My weakest matchup is Esper Control because, like I mentioned, those Ashiok's just come down and do so much work, and if I don't kill them right away, they're going to kill me. So getting paired up against Esper Control the very first round of the top 8, and let alone somebody who had already played against me and lost, he had a better idea of what he needed to do this time around, so he was able to get a lot of work in. And he actually managed to stick an Aetherling, and I couldn't hit the Pithing Needle, even though I had all three in, to stop it, so he was able to get on through, which I can respect the play, and his deck was very good. He was pretty tired, but his deck was really good. And everyone there today was really good. I think there was only 2 people who are some of the top contenders in the States who weren't able to make it today. So this was my first Wizards States Championship. I'm very happy to get into top 8. Last spring at a TCG, I managed to get 3rd place, and hoping to get 1st here at the next one. The little interesting side note, the store was out of English product, so we had access to Korean packs today as our prizes, and I just wanted to share with you a couple of interesting pulls. Lightning Bolt, a couple of Magma Jets, Elemental, 2 of the Boars, 2 of the Golems, and then out of the rares I got my Sylvan Caryatid that you saw, Mistcutter Hydra, Perforos, and Xenagos, which we are looking at building a new deck for. So, hope you enjoyed my Bantchantments deck tech, just going through. Hope you enjoy the playmat. I'm personally really liking it. This one's nice enough that I might even just keep it at home, just because there's some mats, like the Chandra mat, that I don't really want to get dinged up. Please post in the comments or follow me on imtg.com for any discussion on my deck, and look forward to other deck tech videos. Thank you, and have a good day.